So I just want to point out a couple things about the tools that I use in this lesson, that I'm going to be using in this lesson before we start modeling. I use a couple of third-party tools, namely the CPS tools, which you'll find right here, and the MJ Poly tools, as well as the Maya default tools. Both of these tools, the MJ Poly tools and the CPS tools, can be found online. The MJ Poly tools can be found at this web address here, and the CPS tools can be found on High-End 3D. And they're great tool sets that I highly recommend using. Now, my approach to modeling anything that has a lot of complex shapes, where we need to focus the resolution of our geometry, is to model things in components. Model each of the important features like the mouth, the eye, the features that are going to be doing a lot of unique deformation, namely for facial animation. So that's going to be my approach to this rather than hammering it out from a solid cube. So I'm going to bring up my CPS toolbox, which works basically like the shelves. It's just a handier tear-off window here. And I'm going to start off with the Create Polygon tool, and I'm just going to start outlining the shape of our face. Now this is going to give us a starting point for our geometry to be extruded from. And keep this stage really, really loose. A lot of this geometry is going to change as our model evolves. So I'm just going to roughly block this in. And then I'm going to extrude the face here. Get rid of that. What that's leaving us with is just this flat plane here once we outline the form. So we need to get rid of these faces after we extrude. So now that we've done that, we can start using these edges as a starting point for our features. So I'm going to start off with the mouth here, and I'm just going to select these edges. And before I do that, I want to turn my my backface culling on here. So I'm just going to grab these edges, and let's go to our front view. And I'm just going to pull those out and roughly start forming our edge loops around the mouth. And we want to keep this stage pretty loose, especially in this block-in stage. We don't want to noodle in too much detail. But as it turns out, if you keep this stage, if you're pretty accurate in this early stage, you won't have to do too much noodling once we get to the polished stage. But you do want to keep this definitely loose until you have the rest of the geometry to tie it in. So I'm just going to keep going around here and pushing and pulling these points until I get what I like. So I'm going to get the Append Polygon tool here and close off these faces. Now, quads versus tris. A quadded model is definitely cleaner, but since we are building a low poly model, we do need to be kind of economic with where we put our geometry. So when it comes down to it, if you have to terminate a loop into a tri, that's okay, because in the long run, it's going to save you geometry. Also, since we are building a low poly model here, and we do have to focus our resolution, our polygon resolution, into the areas that are most important, like the mouth and the eyes. This technique allows us to do that, to focus our resolution where we absolutely need it. So I'm going to add another loop around here, especially around the mouth. We want to have plenty of edge loops so we hold a nice shape for facial animation. So I'm going to use my MJ Poly tools, and I'm just going to let me tear this off here. So in these first steps, I'll kind of show which tool I'm using within the MJ Poly tools, and then later on I'll just use my toolbox, which I have buttons set up for here. So I'm going to add another split around there. And let's just pull this off to the side a little bit. Now I'm switching back and forth between X-ray mode, and I have a hotkey set up for that. That can be found within the shading options here. If you go under shading, shade options, and X-ray, here's your wireframe on shaded X-ray. I switch between those quite a bit so I can see the underlying drawing. So that's really about it for the initial block-in stage of our mouth. Now we can move on to some of the other features. So let's move on to the nose next. Now, this initial outline that we did was basically just a reference point for us to see both where our geometry is going to be extruded from, and also just kind of an outline, a guideline in addition to our image planes. So the nose is the only piece on the head that I'm going to build from a polygon primitive. And I'm actually going to start that out from a cube. So I'm just going to get rid of those faces on the outline. And let's bring our images back up. And I'm going to create a cube here and kind of roughly move that into place. Now the reason I start out with a cube for the nose, because the nose lends itself to that general shape, and it would be a lot easier to get this from a primitive rather than trying to extrude edges to get that shape. So there's no hard rules here on how you do things. It's what you can get to work best for you. Let me move these out of the way. I want to split this cube in half here, so we're only dealing with half of the head. And let's get rid of these faces here. Great, and we don't need these faces in the back as well, so let's get rid of that. And let's turn our image planes back on here. So I'm going to use the MJ Poly tools again to add another split. I don't want multiple splits. There we go. Just one split. Okay, there we go. And move this out to roughly the ball of the nose. Now you're going to have to try and find a balance between what's accurate to the drawing versus what looks good on geometry. So it's a constant balancing act that you need to keep in mind while you're modeling. Everything isn't set in stone. This is definitely an exploration period of just finding what works and what doesn't. It's that artistic license that comes into play when you're building these, and you want to use your judgment, use your best judgment as to what looks good and what doesn't. I use very simple tools in this process, mostly extruding faces, extruding edges, and the split tools like the split polygon tool and the cut faces tool. You really only need a handful of solid tools to when you're modeling. It's also a kind of a give and take while you're hammering this out. You know, add, subtract geometry until you get some nice clean edge loops. So like in this area, for instance, I don't think I want this edge here, so I'm going to get rid of that for right now because it was starting to look a little too cluttered within that area. Remember, we want to keep this geometry as clean as possible and as simple as possible. The more that you can master that, the better your models will look in the long run, and the more economical they'll be. And what I mean by economical is that you'll keep the poly counts low, which is what we need in the game environment. But you also want your models to look as good as they can. In areas like the bottom of the nose, we don't want to be building any nostrils or anything like that. We want to keep the just a flat plane. Building little details like nostrils, the ear. We really don't need those little details. So a flat plane will suffice on the underside of the nose. So as you can see, this process works rather quickly. And there's a lot less tweaking that you need to do in the long run, in the end. Now remember, we don't want any of these faces in the back, which is a result of us extruding the face. So let's blow away all those. And for right now, until I start building the rest of the features, I'm just going to terminate this loop right there in a try. And we want to make sure, whenever we're doing any combining any vertices like this, you want to make sure that you merge your vertices. A lot of people overlook that step, and you'll have a lot of open edges within your model. And one of the things that I like to do is often check my open edges to make sure that I don't have any within the interior of the model, because that's something that we really don't want. So to check that, you can go under your custom polygon display options, and you'll have options here for highlighting your border edges, which are your open edges of your geometry, texture borders. You can check your normals and such from this menu. I have hotkeys set up for that, so as you can see, here's where our open borders are. Another good thing to check is whether or not your faces are facing the right way. So commonly, quite often, I will turn my backface culling on and off to make sure that everything's facing the right way. That can also be found in the custom polygon display options. So back to our nose here. We're just about finished with the block end of our nose. I'm just smoothing out some of the plane changes here, and making sure that we're getting the shape of the nose that we want. Even though I said you want to keep this early block end stage as simple as possible, you also don't want to go too fast. You want to the better that you can get the resolution to a nice state in this beginning stage, it will make your job that much easier once you start moving on to the later stages of the model. So I'm seeing this edge here, and I don't think I really want that there, so let's get rid of that. Again, I'm trying to keep my topology simple by not putting in too many things that I don't need, too much geometry that I don't need, too many edge loops. And I'm just going to snap this vert over, which is going to start the bottom plane of our brow ridge there, going into the nose. So that's about it for our nose at this point. Let's take a look at that. And you can see very quickly we're getting some nice geometry, and our features are starting to develop. So let's move back down to our mouth here, and we want to add some more loops to better tie this into the nose. This is an area that we can resolve at this stage. So the first thing I want to do is I want to combine these two pieces of geometry. That way we can weld these vertices together, merge these vertices together. Remember, we don't want any open edges on our model. So as you can see, we have this one, this is up here, highlighted by this border, like we discussed. So now I want to add a few more loops around the edge of the mouth here. So I'm just going to again use my extrude edges tool. And just kind of roughly bring that out, and then we can just snap the verts to the corresponding spots on the nose here. So let's weld those together. And I actually want this loop to connect to the upper part here. Leaves us with a quad. So now we're left with connecting some more loops to this vert here. We want to add a little bit more detail along the edge of the mouth here. This would be a little bit too economical. We do want to have, again, enough geometry there that we have some nice deformation in the mouth. So let's go ahead and select these edges. And this vertex as well. And I'm going to use the connect verts edges faces within the MJ tools. And just add another loop along the mouth there. And I'm just going to do a little bit more sculpting in this area. Again, we're keeping this. We're still keeping this rough until we actually start tying in some more of the head. There's probably going to be a little bit more geometry that we may need to add or subtract, depending on how the rest of our head turns out. That's kind of the disadvantage of using this technique. You can't see the model as a whole, so you really want to rely on your image planes at this point. Any technique is going to have its ups and downs. So whatever works best for you, it's a combination. Again, of the exploration process and finding what does work best for you. So I'm just going to tie these together here. It's okay at this stage to have some loops just kind of end, again, because we are trying to find where our geometry is going. So you see that's starting to tie in nicely with our nose. And let's go one more loop out, again with our extrude edge tool. And I'm going to turn my image planes back off again so I can have a better view. And you can see how things are starting to tie nicely together now. Make sure we merge those verts. So you can see we have this nice ball of the mouth with our edge loops starting to form. And you can see where our geometry is going to start to carry out to the rest of the head. I'm just going to do a little bit more tweaking in here. And I want to turn my back face culling off, or on rather, so we're not selecting any of the verts on the back side of the head. And just continue to sculpt our lips here. So that's a good area to stop here with the mouth until we get to the rest of the head. One thing I want to point out before we move on to the eye is our history state here. We want to delete that pretty often to keep our scene clean and keep Maya performing at its best. So that can be found under Edit, Delete either by type or all by type, and History. So you can see that we no longer have all that information in our scene. So let's move on to the eye here. I've created a polysphere with 6 divisions. That's all you really need for these low-res models. I wouldn't go any higher than 8, and I really wouldn't go any lower than 6. So 6 or 8 is pretty much your range. So let's turn that layer off again for this initial stage. Now we're going to build the eye much in the same way that we did the outlining the shape of the head. And we're just going to start outlining the contour of the eye here. Again, you can keep this stage loose and make adjustments after you've created this plane. So now, again, we have a poly plane here. And I'm just going to kind of fine tune it a little bit better to match with our drawing here, with our eye. And we want to get this kind of accurate at this stage, so we don't have to make too much tweaking once we start extruding edges from this. So that looks okay. Let's go ahead and select all these edges, and let's extrude those out. And again, we're just kind of drawing. It's almost 2D modeling in a sense. We're just tracing the contours of our drawing here in kind of a rough form. So now that we've got it that far, we want to delete that inner plane and move it out to where our eye is. So let's turn our eye on. And slide this out to here. So now that we have the eye in place, we have a reference point to wrap our contour of the eye around. So let's just start moving some of these points back in space. And that should be good for right now. So now we want to do the same thing that we did with the mouth and just start radiating these edge loops out from the center of the eye. And remember, the eye is also going to be an area that has a lot of expression and a lot of movement. So we definitely want to resolve this geometry as best we can. And get it as clean as possible. I really try and concentrate on the planes of the face in these early stages. Much like we did with the nose, we have the up plane, the front plane, and the down plane. That goes for all of the features. So right now I'm building the down plane of the brow ridge and the top plane of the cheekbone here. Getting these as accurate as possible will help tie in the rest of the face. So as you can see, here's the down plane of our brow ridge. Just getting that into place, and here's the top plane of our cheek. Now you can see it's a little bit off on our drawing. This is again what I was talking about with using your best artistic judgment to see what looks right and what doesn't. And that'll come into play even more once we get to the rest of the head. Now I want to close off the inside of my eye at this point, so I'm going to turn my eye layer off again. And let's select those edges. And we're simply just going to pull this back inside the head and close it off. And that's all we really need to do for that. So again, let's use our extrude edges tool, select the verts, and just merge them together into a single point. So now when we turn our eye back on, you can see how that's closed off. We may need to make some adjustments here, as you can see, and kind of push that back in space a little bit more. There will definitely be some fine-tuning that you'll need to do on your own that you won't see in this video for sake of time. So I want to combine this with the rest of our features now, so it'll make it easier for us to tie some of this together. So I think at this point I want to merge these verts. And I'm just going to snap this vert to the edge here because I'm not sure how I want to terminate that yet. Now, the advantage to combining our features like this, combining the eye with the nose, is that we can use the append polygon tool and kind of speed things up a bit here. And you can see my pen polygon tool is reacting funny. So what that's telling me is that these faces are probably not facing the right direction. The normals are not facing the right direction. So remember, the way we can check that is by turning our back face culling. So you can see they aren't facing the right way. So let's select those faces and make sure we're not getting anything in the back here. And we're going to go under Edit Polygons, Normals, and Reverse. So now when we turn our back face culling on, you can see that they don't disappear. So now when we use our Append Polygon tool, it should react the way that we want it to by connecting those faces together. So I'm going to use my Split Polygon tool now and connect these edges together here. And we're definitely going to want to add at least one more loop across the top of the nose here to help the shape from the side profile here. Noses aren't straight down like that, so we want to add a little bit of shape, which will also help us tie in another loop around the eye. So again, let's use our Split Polygon tool and just come down like that. So now we can select the edges, this edge loop around our eye again. And let's extrude that. Get it going the right direction here. And start snapping those points and forming our brow ridge here. And let's take our Append Polygon tool, and now we can connect those together. And this is looking a little too like like too much geometry within here, so I want to kind of edit this a bit. And I'm just going to get rid of some of these loops here. Actually, some of these rings rather. And as you can see, I just collapsed those together. And let's add one more loop around the top of our eye here. And that should be it for modeling our features here on the face. The only other part that we want to do as a separate piece is the ear. So let's move on over to the ear now. So let's move to our side view here, so we can start modeling the ear. And once again, we're going to use the Create Polygon tool and trace the contour of our ear here. Now you can see I'm cutting it off a bit. We don't want to trace the contour exactly. That would just be way too many polys, and again, we're trying to keep the poly count low. So we have that flat plane that we started off the head with and the eye with, and let's drag that out to the side of the head here. And I'm gonna turn this plane off. I'm sorry, I'm gonna slide this plane back here so it's not interfering with the ear. And let's check the front view here. Kind of slide it into place. And I'm gonna snap my pivot out a little ways here. And you do that by pressing the insert key to switch between those two. And I'm just going to rotate that out to the shape of the ear. Or to the drawing of the ear, rather. So I can turn my image planes off for a moment here. Now that I have the outline of the ear, so I can just concentrate on modeling the ear. We don't really need the image planes at this point. So I'm going to, again, be extruding faces. And once again, and we don't need that inside plane, so let's go ahead and delete that. We're also going to consolidate this a bit. So I'm going to check my my backface culling just to make sure that all the faces are facing the right way. And we're going to merge some of these verts together right away because we know we're going to tie this into the side of the head. And that's a non-existent plane on the ear anyways. So let's do that. And make sure we're merging those verts together so there's no open edges. And I'm going to delete this front plane because I'm sure I'm going to need this geometry to tie to the side of the head. So I'm going to leave it for now, and then we'll see what happens once we get the geometry for the head down. Let's merge that down for now. And also the back plane of our head is going to change quite a bit. Of our ear is going to change quite a bit once we get the side of the head locked into place. And you know what? Let's actually go ahead and merge that as well. And we'll see what happens once we start modeling the head. So that's basically it for our ear. Keep it simple. You really don't need much more than a flat plane along the side here. And once we start tying in the side of the head, we can dictate where this geometry is going to go, where these divisions along the front of the plane here. But we really don't need any interior details of the ear. That'll be done with texture. So let's zoom out here and take a look at our model. And let's combine all the pieces. After you get your model this far, you'll want to spend a little bit of time polishing your geometry a bit, smoothing things out, making sure that your spacing is nice and even around the edge loops, and things just generally flow nicely and look aesthetically pleasing. If it looks good to the eye, then it's probably good geometry. So again, just you want to spend some time polishing this up before moving on to the next stage. And that's basically it for our modeling our features.